Good evening, everyone. How are y'all doing? Hello, Arabala. Hello, Manston. Hello, Pixel. Hello to you all. I have with me special little treat. These, believe it or not, are donut holes. I made them myself. They are quite delectable. They are soft on the inside. Here, I'll even show you. This one. See? You might not be able to hear the crunch, but there is a crunch. And yeah, look at it. Nice and fluffy on the inside. It has a nice crunch on the outside. And all that cinnamon sugar. It's like, these are good. I'm really, really, really happy with the recipe. Yeah, sure. Actually, I could type it out right now. Let's see. Two cups flour, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2/3 cup of sugar. Mix together, add 1 tablespoon of butter and 5/8 cup of milk. Mix together. You may need a touch more milk or flour to make a dough. Take that dough, break it in half repeatedly until you get about 48 small balls, roughly the same size. Air fry them in batches of no more than 24 at 375 F for 4 minutes. Remove, then deep fry them at 345 F for 1 minute 15 seconds. Set on a paper towel. Roll in some cinnamon sugar. Set on another paper towel for about 10 minutes. Then serve. It hardens a bit when it sets after the deep fryer. That hardening gives it a very nice crunch. These things also somehow do not go stale. And if you need to save the dough, you can stuff the dough in a Ziploc bag and store it in the fridge for a week. No yeast, no eggs, not gonna go bad, really. There. That's the entire thing. The air fryer gives it a nice fluff on the inside, but here's the thing. If you purely air fry them, it just doesn't turn out the same. Like these become like a 4 or 5 out of 10 if you purely air fry them. And you're not really looking for a 4 or 5. I mean, you can if you want, but whatever. So, but if you purely deep fry them, the outside, it changes from a minute 15 to about 3 minutes. And you will, the outside is going to crispify. It's going to be a little deeper and it's going to crisp harder. It's still going to have that nice crunch, but the crunch might actually be a little on the hard side, if that makes sense. So between the two of them, it fluffs up, but hasn't quite brown. I mean, it's a little bit brown from the air fryer, but not a lot. Like you could still see that, oh, hey, you got some cooking still left to do, huh? You deep fry them for a minute and just take you'll probably want one of these. Eh? 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 Come on. Come on. Where are you? Where are you? You'll probably want one of these. Um, that's a like a metal spatula flipper. Those things are a godsend for deep fryers because you can constantly just like move it over, swish it around, constantly lightly turn it over and over and over again. I mean, you're only cooking it for a minute, so you're not leaving the deep fryer for any reason. Like it's only going to be there for a minute and 15 seconds, so might as well keep turning so it gets a nice even, crispifying. But it is what it is. A metal ones, you'll want a metal one with a non-metal handle or something on the wood or something plastic or something because it's going to constantly be in connection with heat, like 300 degrees. That temperature is going to go up the handle and eventually where your hand is, right here, it's going to go like from the flipper side to the handle right here. Yeah, it's eventually going to burn you, and you don't want that. So it's just like that, or that, a metal ladle, a tiny little scoop thing. Those things are great for deep fryers. I kid you not. Every single time I use my deep fryer, I use one of those three. Every single time. And it's usually the one that I linked you. Although mine looks different. It, tomato, they all work the same. Have one, the deep fryer becomes an easy thing. As far as deep fryer versus air fryer, this is one of those. Both works. The air fryer just it it's the difference between a 5 of 10 and a 9 of 10. Like these things are good. I kid you not. They are good, and you can make the dough in advance. I'm not even kidding. I had those donuts, or those donut holes. I had the dough in my fridge for, I want to say, 5 days now. I just cooked them up. I'm still satisfied with them. It's a little sticky, but well, it's not terribly too hard. But my mom tried air frying them on their own. Didn't turn out so well. Not at all. Like it's just like she was like, I these things suck. I don't know what you did, but I don't want to make them again. So I digress. All right, have fun at work, Pixel. Hi, Nathan. Let's begin the next chapter. Yeah, yeah. Okay. I shouldn't have drank that coffee. I might be going for a bathroom break after the first chapter. Huh? All right. Let's start recording. Chapter 11, Quidditch. As they entered November, the weather turned very cold. The mountains around the school became icy gray, and the lake like chilled steel. Every morning the ground was covered in frost. Hagrid could be seen from the upstairs windows, defrosting broomsticks on the Quidditch pitch. Bundled up in a long moleskin overcoat, rabbit fur gloves, and enormous beaverskin boots. The Quidditch season had begun. On Saturday, Harry would be playing in his first match after weeks of training. Gryffindor versus Slytherin. If Gryffindor won, they would move up into second place in the house championship. Hardly anyone had seen Harry play because Wood had decided that, as their secret weapon, Harry should be kept well secret. But the news that he was playing Seeker had leaked out somehow, and Harry didn't know which was worse. People telling him he'd be brilliant, or people telling him they'd be running around underneath him holding a mattress. He was really lucky that Harry now had Hermione as a friend. He didn't know how he'd have got through all his homework without her. What with all the last-minute Quidditch practice Wood was making them do. She had also lent him Quidditch Through the Ages. It turned out to be a very interesting read. Harry learnt that there were 700 ways of committing a Quidditch foul, and that all of them happened during a World Cup match in 1473. That Seekers were usually the smallest and fastest players, and the most serious Quidditch accidents seemed to happen to them. That although people rarely died playing Quidditch, referees had been known to vanish and turn up months later in the Sahara Desert. Hermione had become a bit more relaxed about breaking rules since Harry and Ron had saved her from the mountain troll. She was much nicer for it. The day before Harry's first Quidditch match, 3 of them were out in the freezing courtyard during break, and she had conjured them up a bright blue fire which could be carried around in a jam jar. They were standing with their backs to it, getting warm, when Snape crossed the yard. Harry noticed at once that Snape was limping. Harry, Ron, and Hermione moved closer together to block the fire from view. They were sure it wouldn't be allowed. Unfortunately, something about their guilty faces caught Snape's eye. He limped over. He hadn't seen the fire, but he seemed to be looking for a reason to tell them off anyway. What's that you've got there, Potter? It was Quidditch Through the Ages. Harry showed him. Library books are not to be taken outside the school, said Snape. Give it to me. 5 points from Gryffindor. He just made that rule up, Harry muttered angrily as Snape limped away. Wonder what's wrong with his leg. Dunno, but I hope it's really hurting him, Ron said bitterly. The Griffin common room was very noisy that evening. Harry, Ron, and Hermione sat together next to a window. Hermione was checking Harry and Ron's charms homework for them. She would never let them copy. How will you learn? But by asking her to read it through, they got the right answers anyway. Harry felt restless. He wanted Quidditch Through the Ages back to take his mind off his nerves about tomorrow. Why should he be afraid of Snape? Getting up, he told Ron and Hermione he was going to ask Snape if he could have it. Rather you than me, they said together. But Harry had an idea that Snape wouldn't refuse. The other teachers were listening. He made his way down to the staff room and knocked. There was no answer. He knocked again. Nothing. Perhaps Snape had left the book in there. It was worth a try. He pushed the door ajar and peered inside, and a horrible scene met his eyes. Snape and Filch were inside alone. Snape was holding his robes above his knees. One of his legs was bloody and mangled. Filch was handing Snape bandages. Blasted thing, Snape was saying. How are you supposed to keep your eyes on all 3 heads at once? Harry tried to shut the door quietly, but Potter! Snape's face was twisted with fury as he dropped his robes quickly to hide his leg. Harry gulped. I was just wondering if I could have my book back. Get out! Out! Harry left before Snape could take any more points from Gryffindor. He sprinted back upstairs. Did you get it? Ron asked Harry, as Harry joined them. What's the matter? In a low whisper, Harry told him what he'd seen. You know what this means, he finished breathlessly. He tried to get past the 3-headed dog at Halloween. That's where he was going when we saw him. He's after whatever its guardian. Bet my broomstick he let the troll in, create a diversion. Hermione's eyes were wide. No, he wouldn't, she said. I know he's not very nice. He wouldn't try and steal something Dumbledore was keeping safe. Honestly, Hermione, you think all the teachers are saints or something, snapped Ron. I'm with Harry. I wouldn't put it past Snape. What's he after? What's that dog guarding? Harry went to bed with his head buzzing with the same question. Neville was snoring loudly, but Harry couldn't sleep. He tried to empty his mind. He needed sleep. He had to. He had his first Quidditch match in a few hours. But the expression on Snape's face when Harry had seen his leg wasn't easy to forget. The next morning dawned very bright and cold. The great hall was full of the delicious smell of fried sausages and the cheerful chatter of everyone looking forward to a good Quidditch match. You've got to eat some breakfast. I don't want anything. Just a bit of toast, wheedled Hermione. I'm not hungry. Harry felt terrible. In an hour's time, he'd be walking onto the pitch. Harry, you need your strength, said Seamus Finnegan. Seekers are always the ones who get knobbed by the other team. Thanks, Seamus, said Harry, watching Seamus pile ketchup on his sausages. By 11 o'clock, the whole school seemed to be out on the stands around the Quidditch pitch. Many students had binoculars. The seats might be raised high into the air, but it was still difficult to see what was going on sometimes. Ron and Hermione joined Neville, Seamus, and Dean, the West Ham fan, up in the top. As a surprise for Harry, they had painted a large banner on one of the sheets Scabbers had ruined. It said, Potter for President, and Dean, who was good at drawing, had done a large Gryffindor lion underneath. Then Hermione had performed a tricky little charm so that the paint flashed different colors. Meanwhile, in the changing rooms, Harry and the rest of the team were changing into their scarlet Quidditch robes. Slytherin would be playing in green. Wood cleared his throat for silence. Okay, men. And women, said Chaser Angelina Johnson. And women, Wood agreed. This is it. The big one, said Fred Weasley. One we've all been waiting for, said George. We know Oliver's speech by heart, Fred told Harry. We were in the team last year. Shut up, you two, said Wood. This is the best team Gryffindor's had in years. Going to win. I know it. He glared at them all as if to say, or else. Right, it's time. Good luck, all of you. Harry followed Fred and George out of the changing room and, hoping his knees weren't going to give away, walked on to the pitch to loud cheers. Madame Hooch was refereeing. She stood in the middle of the pitch, waiting for the two teams, her broom in her hand. Now I want a nice, fair game, all of you, she said, once they were gathered around her. Harry noticed that she seemed to be speaking particularly to a Slytherin captain, Marcus Flint, a 5th year. Harry thought Flint looked as if he had some troll blood in him. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the fluttering banner high above flashing, Potter for President, over the crowd. His heart skipped. He felt braver. Mount your brooms, please. Harry clambered onto his Nimbus 2000. Madame Hooch gave a loud blast on her silver whistle. 15 brooms rose up, high into the air. They were off. And the quaffle is taken immediately by Angelina Johnson of Gryffindor. What an excellent chaser that girl is, and rather attractive too. Jordan! Sorry, Professor. Weasley twins' friend Lee Jordan was doing commentary for the match, closely watched by Professor McGonagall. And she's really belting along up there. A neat pass to Alicia Spinnet, a good find of Oliver Wood's, last year only a reserve. Back to Johnson, and no, Slytherin have taken the quaffle. Slytherin Captus Marcus Flint gains the quaffle, and off he goes. Flint, flying like an eagle up there, is going to Nope, stopped by an excellent move by Gryffindor Keeper Wood, and Gryffindor take the quaffle. That's Chaser Katie Bell of Gryffindor there. Nice dive around Flint, off up the field, and ouch! That must have hurt. Hit in the back of the head by a bludger. Quaffle taken by Slytherin. That's Adrian Pusey speeding off towards the ghost post, but he's balked by his second bludger. Sent his way by Fred or George Weasley. Can't tell which. Nice play by the Gryffindor beater anyway. And Johnson back in possession of the quaffle. A clear field ahead, and off she goes. She's really flying. Dodges a speeding bludger. The goalposts are ahead. Come on now. Angelina. Keeper Bletchy dives. Missins. Gryffindor score. Gryffindor cheers filled the cold air with howls and moans from the Slytherin. Budge up there. Move along. Hagrid. Ron and Hermione squeezed together to give Hagrid enough space to join them. Been watching for me yet? Said Hagrid, patting a large pair of binoculars round his neck. It isn't the same as being in the crowd. No sign of the snitch yet? Nope, said Ron. Harry hasn't had much to do yet. Kept out of trouble, though. That's something. Said Hagrid, raising his binoculars and peering skywards at the speck that was Harry. Way up above them, Harry was gliding over the game, squinting about for some sign of the snitch. This was part of his and Wood's game plan. Keep out of the way until you catch sight of the snitch, Wood had said. We don't want you attacked before you have to be. When Angelina had scored, Harry had done a couple of loop-de-loops to let out his feelings. Now he was back at staring around for the snitch. Once he caught sight of a flash of gold, but it was just a reflection from one of the Weasley's wristwatches, and once a bludger decided to come pelting his way, more like a cannonball than anything. But Harry dodged it, and Fred Weasley came chasing after it. All right there, Harry, he had time to yell, as he beat the bludger furiously towards Marcus Flint. Slytherin possession, Lee Jordan was saying. Chaser Pusey ducks 2 bludgers, 2 Weasleys, and the Chaser Bell, and speeds towards the... Wait a minute, was that the snitch? A murmur ran through the crowd as Adrian Pusey dropped the quaffle, too busy to looking over his shoulder at the flash of gold that had passed his left ear. Harry saw it. In a great rush of excitement, he dived towards after the streak of gold. Slytherin seeker Terence Higgs had seen it too. Neck and neck, they hurtled towards the snitch. All the chasers seemed to have forgotten what they were supposed to be doing as they hung in midair to watch. Harry was faster than Higgs. He could see the little round ball wings fluttering. Darting up ahead, he put on an extra spurt of speed. Wham! A roar of rage echoed from the Gryffindors below. Marcus Flint had blocked Harry on purpose, and Harry's broom spun off course, Harry holding for dear life. Foul! Screamed the Gryffindors. Madame Hooch spoke angrily to Flint and then ordered a free shot at the goalpost for the Gryffindor. But in all the confusion, of course, Golden Snitch had disappeared from sight. Down in the stands, Dean Thomas was yelling, "Send him off, ref! Red card!" This isn't football, Dean," Ron reminded him. "You can't send people off in Quidditch, and what's a red card?" But Hagrid was on Dee's side. They ought to change the rules. Flint could have knocked Harry out of the air." Lee Jordan was finding it difficult not to take sides. So, after that obvious and disgusting bit of cheating, Jordan! Growled Professor McGonagall. I mean, after that open and revolting foul, Jordan, I'm warning you. Alright, alright. Flint nearly kills the Gryffindor Seeker, which could happen to anyone, I'm sure. So a penalty to Gryffindor taken by Spinet, who puts it away. No trouble, and we continue to play. Gryffindor still in possession. It was as Harry dodged another bludger, which was spinning dangerously past his head, that it happened. His broom gave a sudden, frightening lurch. For a split second, he thought he was going to fall. He gripped his broom tightly with both hands and knees. He'd never felt anything like that. It happened again. It was as though the broom was trying to buck him off, but Nimbus 2000s did not suddenly decide to buck their riders off. Harry tried to turn back towards Gryffindor goalposts. He had half a mind to ask Wood to call a timeout, and he realized that his broom was completely out of his control. He couldn't turn it. He couldn't direct it at all. It was zigzagging through the air, and, every now and then, making violent swishing movements which almost unseated him. Lee was still commentating. Slytherin in possession. Flint with the quaffle, passes Spinet, passes Bell, hit hard in the face by a bludger. Hope it broke his nose. Only joking, Professor. Slytherin score. Oh no. The Slytherins were cheering. No one seemed to have noticed Harry's broom was behaving strangely. It was carrying him slowly higher, away from the game, jerking and twitching as it went. Dunno what Harry thinks he's doing, Hagrid mumbled. He stared, though, through his binoculars. I didn't know better. I'd say he's lost control of his broom, but he can't have. Suddenly, people were pointing up at Harry all over the stands. His broom started to roll over and over, with him only just managing to hold on. The whole room. Then the whole crowd gasped. Harry's broom had given a wild jerk, and Harry swung off it. He was now dangling from it, holding on with only one hand. Did something happen to it when Flint blocked him? Can't have, Hagrid said, his voice shaky. Can't nothing interfere with a broomstick except powerful dark magic. No kid could do that to a Nimbus 2000. At these words, Hermione seized Hagrid's binoculars, but instead of looking up at Harry, she started looking frantically at the crowd. What are you doing? Moaned Ron, grey-faced. I knew it, Hermione gasped. Snape, look. Ron grabbed the binoculars. Snape was in the middle of the stands opposite them. He had his eyes fixed on Harry and was muttering non-stop under his breath. He's doing something. Jinxing the broom, said Hermione. What should we do? Leave it to me. Before Ron could say another word, Hermione had disappeared. Ron turned the binoculars back on Harry. His broom was vibrating so hard, it was almost impossible for him to hang on much longer. The whole crowd were on their feet, watching, terrified, as the Weasleys flew up to try to pull Harry to safely onto one of their brooms. It was no good. Every time they got near him, the broom would jump higher still. They dropped lower and circled beneath him, obviously hoping to catch him if he fell. Marcus Flint seized the quaffle and scored 5 times without anyone noticing. Come on, Hermione, Ron muttered desperately. Hermione had fought her way across the stand where Snape stood and was now racing along the row behind him. She didn't even stop to say sorry as she knocked Professor Quirrell headfirst into the row in front, reaching Snape She crouched down, pulled out her wand, and whispered a few well-chosen words. Bright blue flames shot from her wand onto the hem of Snape's robes. It took about 30 seconds for Snape to realize that he was on fire. A sudden yelp told her she had done her job. Scooping the fire off him in a little jar in her pocket, she scrambled back along the row. Snape would never know what had happened. It was enough. Up in the air, Harry was suddenly able to clamber back onto his broom. "Neville, you can look," Ron said. Neville had been sobbing into Hagrid's jacket for the last 5 minutes. Harry was speeding towards the ground when the crowd saw him clap his hand to his mouth as though he were about to be sick. He'd hit the pitch on all fours, coughed, and something gold fell into his hand. "I've got the snitch," he shouted, waving it above his head, and the game ended in complete confusion. "Didn't catch it. He nearly swallowed it." Flint was still howling 20 minutes later. But it made no difference. Harry hadn't broken any rules, and Lee Jordan was still happily shouting the result. Gryffindor had won by 170 points to 60. Harry heard none of this, though. He was being made a cup of strong tea back in Hagrid's hut with Ron and Hermione. "It was Snape," Ron was explaining. "Hermione and I saw him. He was cursing your broomstick, muttering. He wouldn't take his eyes off you." "Rubbish," said Hagrid, who hadn't heard a word of what had gone on next to him in the stands. "Why would Snape do something like that?" Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at each other, wondering what to tell him. Harry decided on the truth. "I found out something about him," he told Hagrid. "He tried to get past that 3-headed dog at Halloween. It bit him. You think he was trying to steal whatever it was guarding?" Hagrid dropped the teapot. "How do you know about Fluffy?" he said. "Fluffy?" "Yeah, he's mine. Bought him off a Greek chappie I met in the pub last year. I lent him to Dumbledore to guard the—" "Yes?" said Harry eagerly. "Now, don't ask me any more," said Hagrid gruffly. "It's top secret, that is. Snape's trying to steal it." "Rubbish," said Hagrid again. "Snape's a Hogwarts teacher. He did nothing of the sort." "So why did he just try and kill Harry?" cried Hermione. The afternoon's events certainly seemed to have changed her mind about Snape. "I know a jinx when I see one, Hagrid. I've read all about them. You've got to keep eye contact, and Snape wasn't blinking at all. I saw him." "I'm telling you, you're wrong," said Hagrid hotly. "I don't know why Harry's room acted like that, but Snape wouldn't try and kill a student. Now, listen to me, all 3 of you. You're meddling things that don't concern you. It's dangerous. Forget that dog, and you forget what it's guarding. It's between Professor Dumbledore and Nicholas Flamel." "Aha," said Harry. "So there's someone called Nicholas Flamel involved, is there?" Hagrid looked furious with himself. And that's the end of the chapter. I will be back. I have a desperate need to go to the bathroom. And I suddenly also remember that I should not set that. So I will be right back. That coffee is running through me. This will take me a moment. Don't. Hello, MSR. Hello, Tylenol. Welcome you back, or welcome to both of you. It's good to see all of you. The audio stream current bitrate is 0. Well, no crap. There's no music for this. Like, music interferes with what I'm trying to do. Oh, I feel way better. I got donuts right next to me, and I think I'm gonna have one. You'd never you'd never know to think that these donut holes are so much better than anything the stores sell. Like, I know they make theirs by hand and all, but wow, these things are good. They're crunchy too. Like, who would have ever thought that the nice and soft and fluffy, that the nice, soft, and fluffy donuts that everyone loves are beat by something crunchy, huh? That the best donuts are ones that are crunchy. Go figure. How would you all like to see the pictures? This is a $40 picture book after all. Yeah? There's the title page with the golden snitch. It looks like you could see gears in it and stuff. It looks mechanical, not, not like it's flesh. I always thought it was like a leather ball with wings that were like grown from it, not like a metal mechanical bird with gears and stuff. That's a young Hermione with the little blue flame that she made. It's a really nice wand she has. Like, really, really nice. Nothing on this page. There's all of them with Hagrid sitting there, like dwarfing them all. It's actually a rather funny picture. I like it. That was when the two seekers were chasing after the snitch before he got blocked, and yet he stands, and yet it's even like, it looks like a motion blur, but these are hand painted, so he painted it to look like that. Like that's a really interesting touch. And that's all the pictures for that chapter. Oh, we're speeding along tonight. I do believe we'll get this done tomorrow. I hope the library comes with the book. They got a whole Tuesday and Wednesday of operation to get the book. Yeah. I mean, I believe these were reprinted after the movies were made, and they cost $40 each. The artist did really good work. Really, really good work. Happy to see it. Oh, well. Stop recording, and we'll start the recording after. Okay. Let's begin the next chapter, yeah? Chapter 12. The Mirror of Erised. Erised? Erised? I don't know how to pronounce this. Christmas was coming. One morning, Christmas was coming. One morning in mid-December, Hogwarts woke to find itself covered in several feet of snow. The lake froze solid, and the Weasley twins were punished for bewitching several snowballs so that they followed Quirrell around. Bouncing off the back of his turban, the few owls that managed to battle their way through the stormy sky to deliver post had to be nursed back to health by Hagrid before they could fly off again. No one could wait for the holidays to start. While the Gryffindor common room around the Great Hall had roaring fires, the drafty corridors had become icy, and a bitter wind rattled the windows in the classrooms. Worst of all were Professor Snape's classes down in the dungeons, where the breath rose in a mist before them, and they kept as close as possible to their hot cauldrons. "I do feel so sorry," said Draco Malfoy, one potions class, "for all those people who have to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas because they're not wanted at home." He was looking over at Harry as he spoke. Crabbe and Goyle chuckled. Harry, who was measuring out powdered spine of lionfish, ignored them. Malfoy had been even more unpleasant than usual since the Quidditch match. Disgusted that Slytherin had lost, he had tried to get everyone laughing at how a wide-mouthed tree frog would be replacing Harry as Seeker next. Then he realized that nobody found this funny, because they were all so impressed at the way Harry had managed to stay on his bucking broomstick. So Malfoy, jealous and angry, had gone back to taunting Harry about having no proper family. It was true that Harry wasn't going back to Private Drive for Christmas. Professor McGonagall had come round the week before making a list of students who would be staying for the holidays, and Harry had signed up at once. He didn't feel sorry for himself at all. This would probably be the best Christmas he'd ever had. Ron and his brothers were staying too, because Mr. and Mrs. Weasley were going to Romania to visit Charlie. When they left the dungeons at the end of potions, they found a large fir tree blocking the corridor ahead. Two enormous feet sticking out of the bottom, and a loud puffing sound told them that Hagrid was behind it. "Hi, Hagrid. Want any help?" Ron asked, sticking his head through the branches. "Nah, I'm all right. Thanks, Ron." "Would you mind moving out of the way?" came Malfoy's cold drawl from behind them. "Are you trying to earn some extra money, Weasley? Hoping to be gamekeeper yourself when you leave Hogwarts, I suppose. That hut of Hagrid's must seem like a whole palace compared to what your family's used to." Ron dived at Malfoy just as Snape came up the stairs. "Weasley." Ron let go of Malfoy's robes. "He was provoked, Professor Snape," said Hagrid, sticking out his huge hairy face out from behind the tree. "Malfoy was insulting his family." "Be that as it may, fighting is against Hogwarts rules, Hagrid," said Snape silkily. 5 points from Gryffindor, Weasley, and be grateful it isn't more. Move along, all of you." Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle pushed roughly past the tree, scattering needles everywhere and smirking. "I'll get him," said Ron, grinding his teeth at Malfoy's back. One of these days, I'll get him. I hate them both, said Harry, Malfoy and Snape. Come on, cheer up. It's nearly Christmas, said Hagrid. Tell you what, come with me and see the Great Hall. Looks a treat. So Harry, Ron, and Hermione followed Hagrid and his tree off to the Great Hall, where Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick were busy with the Christmas decorations. Hagrid. Hagrid. The last tree. Put it in the far corner, would you? The hall looked spectacular. Festoons of holly and mistletoe hung all around the walls, and no fewer than 12 towering Christmas trees stood around the room, some sparkling with tiny icicles, some glittering with hundreds of candles. How many days you got left until your holidays? Hagrid asked. Just one, said Hermione, and that reminds me. Harry, Ron, we've got half an hour before lunch. We should be in the library. Oh, yeah, right, you're right, said Ron, tearing his eyes away from Professor Flitwick, who had golden baubles blossoming out of his wand and was trailing them over the branches of the new tree. The library, said Hagrid, following them out of the hall. Just before the holidays. Bit keen, aren't you? Oh, we're not working, Harry told them brightly. Ever since you mentioned Nicholas Flamel, we've been trying to find out who he is. Yeah, what? Hagrid looked shocked. Listen here. I told you. Drop it. It's nothing to you what that dog's guarding. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is. That's all. We just want to know who Nicholas Flamel is. That's all, said Hermione. Unless you'd like to tell us and save us the trouble, Harry added. We must have been through hundreds of books already. We just can't find him anywhere. Just give us a hint. I know I've read his name somewhere. Just saying. I'm saying nothing, said Hagrid flatly. Just have to find out for ourselves then, said Ron, and they left Hagrid looking disgruntled and hurried off to the library. They had indeed been searching books for Flamel's name ever since Hagrid had let it slip. Because now, how else were they going to find out what Snape was trying to steal? Trouble was, it was very hard to know where to begin with, not knowing what Flamel might have done to get himself into a book. He wasn't in Great Wizards of the 20th century, or notable magical names of our time. He was missing too from important modern magical discoveries and a study of recent developments in wizardry. And then, of course, was the sheer size of the library. Tens of thousands of books, thousands of shelves, hundreds of narrow rows. Hermione took out a list of subjects and titles she had decided to search, while Ron strode off down a row of books and started pulling them off the shelves at random. Harry had wandered over to the restricted section. He had been wondering for a while if Flamel wasn't somewhere in there. Unfortunately, you needed a specially signed note from one of the teachers to look in any of the restricted books, and he knew he'd never get one. These were the books containing powerful dark magic never taught at Hogwarts and only read by older students studying advanced defense against the dark arts. What are you looking for, boy? Nothing, said Harry. Madame Pince, the librarian, brandished a feather duster at him. You better get out, then. Go on. Out! Wishing he'd been a bit quicker at thinking up some story, Harry left the library. He, Ron, and Hermione had already agreed they'd better not ask Madame Pince where they could find Flamel. They were sure she'd be able to tell him, but they couldn't risk Snape hearing what they were up to. Harry waited outside the corridor to see if the other two had found anything, but he wasn't very hopeful. They had been looking for a fortnight after all, but as they had only had moments between lessons, it wasn't surprising they'd found nothing. What they really needed was a nice, long search without Madame Pince breathing down their necks. 5 minutes later, Ron and Hermione joined them, shaking their heads. They went off to lunch. You will keep looking while I'm away, won't you? And send me an owl if you find anything. And you could ask your parents if they know who Flamel is, said Ron. It'd be safe to ask them. Very safe, as they're both dentists, said Hermione. Once the holidays had started, Ron and Harry were having too good a time to think much about Flamel. They had the dormitory to themselves, and the common room was far emptier than usual. So they were able to get the good armchairs by the fire. They sat by the hour, eating anything they could spear on a toasting fork, bread, crumpets, marshmallows, and plotting ways of getting Malfoy expelled, which were fun to talk about, even if they wouldn't work. Ron also started teaching Harry wizard chess. This was exactly like Muggle chess, except figures were alive, which made it a lot like directing troops in battle. Ron's set was very old and battered, like everything else he owned. He had once belonged to someone else in his family, in this case, his grandfather. However, old chessmen weren't a drawback at all. Ron knew them so well he never had trouble getting them to do what he wanted. Harry played with chessmen Seamus Finnegan had lent him, and they didn't trust him at all. He wasn't a very good player yet, and they kept shouting different bits of advice at him, which was confusing. Don't send me there. Can't you see his knight? Send him. We can afford to lose him. On Christmas Eve, Harry went to bed, looking forward to the next day for food and the fun, but not expecting any presents at all. When he woke early next morning, however, the first thing he saw was a small pile of packages at the foot of his bed. Happy Christmas, said Ron sleepily, as Harry scrambled out of bed and pulled on his dressing gown. You too, said Harry. Will you look at this? I've got some presents. What did you expect? Turnips, said Ron, turning to his own pile, which was a lot bigger than Harry's. Harry picked up the top parcel. It was wrapped in thick brown paper, and scrawled across it was, To Harry, from Hagrid. Inside was a roughly cut wood lute. Hagrid had obviously whittled it himself. Harry blew it, It sounded like a bit. It sounded a bit like an owl. A second, very small parcel contained a note. We received your message and enclose your Christmas present from Uncle Vernon and Aunt Petunia. Sellotaped to the note was a 50-pence piece. That's friendly. That's friendly, said Harry. Ron was fascinated by the 50-pence. Weird. What a shape. This is money? You can keep it, said Harry, laughing at how pleased he was. Hagrid and my aunt and uncle. Hagrid and my aunt and uncle. So, who sent these? I think I know who that one's from, said Ron, going a bit pink and pointing it to a very lumpy parcel. My mum. I told her you didn't expect any presents and... Oh no, he groaned. She's made you a Weasley jumper. Harry had torn open the parcel to find a thick hand-knitted sweater in emerald green and a large box of homemade fudge. Every year she makes us a jumper, said Ron, unwrapping his own. Mine's always maroon. That's really nice of her, said Harry, trying the fudge, which was very tasty. His next present also contained sweets and a large box of chocolate frogs, or a large box of chocolate frogs from Hermione. That left only one parcel. Harry picked it up. It was very light. He unwrapped it. Something fluid and silvery gray went slithering to the floor, where it lay in gleaming folds. Ron gasped. I've heard of those, he said in a hushed voice, dropping the box of every flavor beans he got from Hermione. If that's what I think it is, they're really rare and really valuable. What is it? Harry picked up the shiny, silvery cloth off the floor. It was strange to touch, like water woven into material. It's an invisibility cloak, said Ron, a look of awe on his face. I'm sure it is. Try it on. Harry threw the cloak around his shoulders, and Ron gave a yell. It is! Look down! Harry looked down at his feet. Shh! But they had gone. He dashed to the mirror. Sure enough, his reflection looked back at him, just his head suspended in midair, his body completely invisible. He pulled the cloak over his head, and his reflection vanished completely. There's a note, said Ron suddenly. A note fell out of it. Harry pulled off the cloak and seized the letter, written in narrow, loopy writing he had never seen before, were the following words. Your father left this in my possession before he died. It is time it was returned to you. Use it well. A very Merry Christmas to you. There was no signature. Harry stared at the note. Ron was admiring the cloak. I'd give anything for one of these, he said. Anything. What's the matter? Nothing, said Harry. He felt very strange. Who had sent the cloak? Had it really once belonged to his father? Before he could say or think anything else, the dormitory door was flung open, and Fred and George Weasley bounded in. Harry stuffed the cloak quickly out of sight. He didn't feel like sharing it with anyone else yet. Merry Christmas! Hey, look! Harry's got a Weasley jumper, too! Fred and George were wearing blue jumpers, one with a large yellow F, the other with a large yellow G. Harry's is better than ours, though, said Fred, holding up Harry's jumper. Excuse me? Harry's is better than ours, though, said Fred, holding up Harry's jumper. She obviously makes more of an effort if you're not family. Why aren't you wearing yours, Ron? George demanded. Come on, get it on. They're lovely and worn. I hate maroon, Ron moaned half-heartedly as he pulled it over his head. You haven't got a letter of yours, George observed. I suppose she thinks you don't forget your name. But we're not stupid. We know we're called Gred and Forge. What's all this noise? Percy Weasley stuck his head through the door, looking disapproving. He had clearly come halfway through unwrapping his presents as he, too, carried a lumpy jumper over his arm, which Fred seized. P is for prefect. Get it on, Percy. Come on, we're all wearing ours. Even Harry got one. I don't want, said Percy thickly, as the twins forced the jumper over his head, knocking his glasses askew. And you're not sitting with the prefects today either, said George. Christmas is a time for family. They frog marched Percy from the room, his arms pinned to his sides by his jumper. Harry had never in all his life had such a Christmas dinner. 100 fat roast turkeys, mountains of roast and boiled potatoes, platters of fat chipolatas, tureens of buttered peas, silver boats of thick, rich gravy, and cranberry sauce, and stacks of wizard crackers every few feet along the table. These fantastic crackers were nothing like the feeble muggle ones the Dursleys usually bought, with their little plastic toys and their flimsy paper hats. Harry pulled a wizard cracker with Fred, and it didn't just bang. It went off with a blast like a cannon and engulfed them all in a cloud of blue smoke, while from the inside exploded a rear admiral's hat and several live white mice. Up on the high table, Dumbledore had swapped his pointed hats for a flowered bonnet and was chuckling merrily at a joke Professor Flitwick had just read him. Flaming Christmas puddings followed the turkey. Percy nearly broke his teeth on a silver sickle embedded in his slice. Harry watched Hagrid getting redder and redder in the face as he called for more wine, finally kissing Professor McGonagall on the cheek, who, to Harry's amazement, giggled and blushed, her top hat lopsided. When Harry finally left the table, he was laden down with a stack of things out of the crackers, including a pack of non-explodable luminous balloons, and a grow-your-own warts kit, and his own new wizard chess set. The white mice had disappeared, and Harry had a nasty feeling they were going to end up as Miss Norris's Christmas dinner. Harry and the Weasleys spent a happy afternoon having a furious snowball fight in the grounds. Then, cold, wet, and gasping for breath, they returned to the fire in the Gryffindor common room, where Harry broke in his new wizard chess set by losing spectacularly to Ron. He suspected he wouldn't have lost so badly if Percy hadn't tried to help him so much. After a tea of turkey sandwiches, crumpets, trifle, and Christmas cake, everyone felt too full and sleepy to do much before bed except sit and watch Percy chase Fred and George all over the Gryffindor Tower because they'd stolen his prefect badge. It had been Harry's best Christmas day ever. Something had been nagging at the back of his mind all day. Not until he climbed into bed was he free to think about it. The invisibility cloak and whoever sent it. Ron, full of turkey and cake and with nothing mysterious to bother him, fell asleep almost as soon as he'd drawn the curtains over his four-poster. Harry leant over the side of his own and pulled the cloak out from under it. His father's. This had been his father's. He let the material flow over his hands, smoother than silk, light as air. Use it well, the note had said. He had to try it, now. He slipped out of bed and wrapped the cloak around himself. Looking down at his legs, he saw only moonlight and shadows. It was a very funny feeling. Use it well. Suddenly, Harry felt wide awake. All of Hogwarts was open to him in this cloak. Excitement flooded through him as he stood there in the dark and silence. He could go anywhere in this. Anywhere. And Filch would never know. Ron grunted in his sleep. Should Harry wake him? Something held him back. His father's cloak. He felt that this time, first time, he wanted to use it alone. He crept out of the dormitory, down the stairs, across the common room, and climbed through the portrait hole. Who's there? Squawked the fat lady. Harry said nothing. He walked quickly down the corridor. Should he go? He stopped, his heart racing, and thought. Then it came to him. The restricted section in the library. He'd be able to read as long as he liked. As long as it took to find out who Flamel was. He set off, drawing the invisibility cloak tight around him as he walked. The library was pitch black and very eerie. Harry lit a lamp to see his way along the rows of books. The lamp looked as if it was floating along in midair. Even though Harry could feel his arms supporting it, the sight gave him the creeps. Restricted section was right at the back of the library. Stepping carefully over the rope, which separated these books from the rest of the library, he held up his lamp to read the titles. They didn't tell him much. Their peeling, faded gold letters spelled words in languages Harry couldn't understand. Some had no title at all. One book had a dark stain on it that looked horribly like blood. Hairs on the back of Harry's neck prickled. Maybe he was imagining it. Maybe not. But he thought he heard faint whispering. The faint whispering was coming from the books, as though they knew someone was there who shouldn't be. He had to start somewhere. Setting the lamp down carefully at the floor, he looked along the bottom shelf for an interesting-looking book. A large black and silver volume caught his eye. He pulled it out with difficulty because it was very heavy and, balancing it on his knee, let it fall open. A piercing, blood-curdling shriek split the silence. The book was screaming. Harry snapped it shut, but the shriek went on and on. One high, unbroken, ear-splitting note. He stumbled backwards and knocked over his lamp, which went out at once. Panicking, he heard footsteps coming down the corridor outside. Stuffing the shrieking book back on the shelf, ran for it. He passed Filch almost in the doorway. Filch's pale, wild eyes looked straight through him, and Harry slipped under Filch's outstretched arm and streaked off up the corridor, the book's shrieks still ringing in his ears. He came to a sudden halt in front of a tall suit of armor. He had been so busy getting away from the library, he hadn't paid attention to where he was going. Perhaps because it was dark, he didn't recognize where he went at all. There was a suit of armor near the kitchens, he knew. It must be 5 floors above you. You asked me to come directly to you, Professor, if anyone was wandering around at night, and somebody's been in the library restricted section. Harry felt the blood drain out of his face. Wherever he was, Filch must know a shortcut, as his soft, greasy voice was getting near, and to his horror, it was Snape who replied. The restricted section. Oh, it can't be far. We'll catch them. Harry stood rooted to the spot as Filch and Snape came round the corner ahead. They couldn't see him, of course, but it was a narrow corridor, and if they came much nearer, they'd knock right into him. Cloak didn't stop him being solid. He backed away as quickly as he could. A door stood ajar to his left. This is his only hope. He squeezed through it, holding his breath, trying not to move it, and to his relief, managed to get inside the room without their noticing anything. They walked straight past, and Harry leant against the wall, breathing deeply, listening to their footsteps dying away. That had been close, very close. It was a few seconds before he noticed anything about the room he had hidden in. It looked like a disused classroom. The dark shapes of desks and chairs were piled against the walls, and there was an upturned waste paper basket. But propped against the wall facing him was something that didn't look as if it belonged there. Something that looked as if someone had just put it there to keep it out of the way. It was a magnificent mirror, as high as the ceiling, with an ornate gold frame standing on 2 clawed feet. There was an inscription carved around the top. Iriset stra eru oit ube kefru oit on wosi. His panic fading now that there was no sound of Filch and Snape, Harry moved near the mirror, wanting to look at himself, but see no reflection again. He stepped in front of it. He had to clap his hands to his mouth to stop himself from screaming. He whirled around. His heart was pounding far more furiously Then when the book had screamed, where he had seen not only himself in the mirror, but a whole crowd of people standing right behind him. But the room was empty. Breathing very fast, he turned back to the mirror. There he was, reflected in it, white and scared looking. And there, reflected behind him, were at least 10 others. Harry looked over his shoulder. Still no one was there. Or were they invisible too? Was he, in fact, in a room full of invisible people? And this mirror's trick was that it reflected them, invisible or not? He looked in the mirror again. A woman standing right behind his reflection was smiling at him and waving. He reached out a hand and felt the air behind him. If she was really there, he'd touch her. Her reflections were so close together. But he felt only air. She and the others existed only in the mirror. She was a very pretty woman. She had dark red hair in her eyes. Eyes just like mine, Harry thought, edging a little closer to the glass. Bright green, exactly the same shape. But then he noticed that she was crying, smiling, but crying at the same time. A tall, thin, black-haired man standing next to her put his arm around her. He wore glasses, and his hair was very untidy. It stuck up at the back, just like Harry's did. Harry was so close to the mirror now that his nose was nearly touching that of his reflection. "Mom," he whispered. "Dad?" They just looked at him, smiling. And slowly, Harry looked into the faces of the other people in the mirror and saw other pairs of green eyes like his, other noses like his, even a little old man who looked as though he had Harry's knobbly knees. Harry was looking at his family for the first time in his life. The Potter smiled and waved at Harry. He stared hungrily back at them. His hands pressed flat against the glass, as though he was hoping to fall right through it and reach them. He had a powerful kind of ache inside of him, half joy, half terrible sadness. How long he stood there, he didn't know. The reflections did not fade, and he looked and looked until a distant noise brought him back to his senses. He couldn't stay here. He had to find his way back to bed. He tore his eyes away from his mother's face and whispered, "I'll come back," and hurried from the room. "You could have woken me up," said Ron crossly. "You can come tonight. I'm going back. I want to show you the mirror." "I'd like to see your mom and dad," Ron said eagerly. "And I want you to see all your family, all the Weasleys. You'll be able to show me your other brothers and everyone." "You could see them any old time," said Ron. "Just come around my house in the summer. Anyway, maybe he only shows dead people. Shame about not finding Flamel, though. Have some bacon or something. Why aren't you eating anything?" Harry couldn't eat. He had seen his parents, and would be seeing them again tonight. He had almost forgotten about Flamel. It didn't seem very important anymore. He cared about what that three-headed dog was guarding. Wouldn't it matter if Snape stole it, really? "Are you all right?" said Ron. "You look odd." What Harry feared most was that he might not be able to find the mirror room again. With Ron covered in the cloak too, they had to walk much more slowly the next night. They tried retracing Harry's route from the library, wandering around the dark passageways for nearly an hour. "I'm freezing," said Ron. "Let's forget it and go back." "No," Harry hissed. "I know it's here somewhere." They passed the ghost of a tall witch gliding in the opposite direction, but saw no one else. Just as Ron started moaning that his feet were dead with cold, Harry spotted the suit of armor. "It's here, yes!" They pushed the door open. Harry dropped the cloak from round his shoulders and ran to the mirror. There they were. His mother and father beamed at the sight of him. "See?" Harry whispered. "I can't see anything." Look at them all. There are loads of them." "I can only see you." "Look at it properly. Go on. Stand where I am." Harry stepped aside. But with Ron in front of the mirror, he couldn't see his family anymore. Just Ron in his paisley pajamas. Ron, though, was staring transfixed at his image. "Look at me," he said. "Can you see your family standing around you?" "No. I'm alone. But I'm different. I look older, and I'm head boy." "What?" "I am. I'm wearing the badge like Bill used to. And I'm holding the house cup and the Quidditch cup. I'm Quidditch captain, too." Ron tore his eyes away from the splendid sight to look excitedly at Harry. "Do you think this mirror shows the future?" "How can it? All my family are dead." "Let me have another look." "You had it to yourself all last night. Give me a bit more time." "You're only holding the Quidditch cup. What's interesting about that?" "I want to see my parents." "Don't push me." A sudden noise outside the corridor put an end to their discussion. They hadn't realized how loudly they'd been talking. "Quick!" Ron threw the cloak back over them as the luminous eyes of Miss Norris came round the door. Ron and Harry stood quite still, both thinking the same thing. Did the cloak work on cats? After what seemed like an age, she turned and left. "This isn't safe. She might have gone for Filch. I bet she heard us. Come on." And Ron pulled Harry out of the room. The snow still hadn't melted the next morning. "Want to play chess, Harry?" said Ron. "No." "Why don't we go down and visit Hagrid?" "No, you go." "I know what you're thinking about, Harry. That mirror. Don't go back tonight." "Why not?" "I don't know. I just got a bad feeling about it. And anyway, you've had too many close shaves already. Filch, Snape, and Miss Norris are wandering around. So what if they can't see you? What if they walk into you? What if you knock something over?" "You sound like Hermione." "I'm serious, Harry. Don't go." But Harry had only one thought in his head, which was to get back in front of the mirror. And Ron wasn't going to stop him. That third night, he found his way more quickly than before. He was walking so fast, he knew he was making more noise than was wise. But he didn't meet anyone. And there were his mother and father smiling at him again. and one of his grandfathers nodding happily. Harry sank down to sit on the floor in front of the mirror. There was nothing to stop him from staying here all night with his family. Nothing at all. Except... So, back again, Harry. Harry felt as though his insides had turned ice. He looked behind him. Sitting on one of the desks by the wall was none other than Albus Dumbledore. Harry must have walked straight past him, so desperate to get to the mirror he hadn't noticed him. I didn't see you, sir. Strange how short-sighted being invisible can make you, said Dumbledore, and Harry was relieved to see that he was smiling. So, said Dumbledore, slipping off the desk to sit on the floor with Harry. You, like hundreds before you, have discovered the delights of the Mirror of Erised. I didn't know it was called that, sir. But I expect you realize by now what it does. It shows me my family. And it showed your friend Ron himself as head boy. How did you know? I don't need a cloak to become invisible, said Dumbledore gently. I don't need a cloak to become invisible, said Dumbledore gently. Now, can you think of what the Mirror of Erised shows us all? Harry shook his head. Let me explain. The happiest man on earth would be able to use the Mirror of Erised like a normal mirror. That is, he would look into it and see himself exactly as he is. Does that help? Harry thought. Then he said slowly, It shows us what we want. Whatever we want. Yes and no, said Dumbledore quietly. It shows us nothing more or less than the deepest, most desperate desire of our hearts. You, who have never known your family, see them standing around you. Ronald Weasley, who has always been overshadowed by his brothers, sees himself standing alone, the best of all of them. However, this mirror will give us neither knowledge or truth. Men have wasted away before it, entranced by what they have seen, or been driven mad, not knowing if what it shows is real or even possible. The mirror will be moved to a new home tomorrow, Harry, and I ask you not to go looking for it again. If you ever do run across it, you will now be prepared. It does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live. Remember that. Now, why don't you put that admirable cloak back on and get off to bed? Harry stood up. Sir, Professor Dumbledore, can I ask you something? Obviously. You've just done so. Dumbledore smiled. You may ask me one more thing, however. What do you see when you look in the mirror? I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks. One can never have enough socks, said Dumbledore. Another Christmas has come and gone, and I didn't get a single pair. People will insist on giving me books. It was only when he was back in bed that it struck Harry that Dumbledore might not have been quite truthful. But then he thought, as he shoved Scabbers off his pillow, it had been quite a personal question. Think it's like Erisade? Yeah, that's how I ended up saying it myself. Stop recording. Turn that one on. I'm glad I was able to help you fall asleep. Tylenol. Or Tylenol. I keep wanting to say Tylenol. I do sincerely apologize. And hello, Brony Gamer. How are you? I hope you all are enjoying this. Would you all like to see the pictures? Yes? It is a very expensive picture book. I am doing quite well, Brownie. I am reading a book, and I'm enjoying every second of reading it. Alright, let's start off. There's the chapter, or chapter 12. I think the spider is aesthetic because it would have died a long time ago outside. There's bits of the castle and the tree all losing its leaves, covered in snow and ice. I don't know which one that is wearing the green little sweater. But apparently everyone gets Christmas sweaters and nobody likes them. Why aren't you wearing that sweater I knitted you? Why are you guys making sweaters? Everyone hates sweaters. Why? Why? There's pieces of the chest sitting right there. Morrigan Wolf. Ah, they're a type of sausage. Thank you, Morrigan Wolf. I do appreciate that, and hello to you. Another you, camera. Wait, what? Oh, because it's on this page, that's why. It's gotta be one of the bishops, yeah? It's a cute little wizard's chest set. They move as you do, or they move and live. I would love to play with a chess set like that. And yet more chess pieces. I'd imagine this one's a pawn. I don't know what this one could be. A knight? Maybe a rook? Because you saw the king, queen, bishop. So there's only the knight, rook, and pawn left. Yes? So that one's gotta be either a knight or a rook. Whereas this one's probably a pawn. Nothing on this one. A very empty page. Yet another one that's full of black. Harry sitting there, longing in front of the mirror of Erised, seeing a family that he'll never be able to actually know, or seeing the family he never knew. So sad. But one must never forget that we are living. You have a life to live. What's very unfortunate is that, see that white thing here? It's a tear in the page. Someone pulled the page a little too hard and it tore. Very sad to see it. And Okay, so that red piece was a rook because that one clearly is a knight. So that red one had to have been a rook, whereas that one that looked kind of scared was definitely a pawn, and that one's a knight because it's on the little horsey. That makes sense. There's Dumbledore sitting next to Harry, giving him a little talking to. The little boy. He sat, like, he saw his family, the one thing he wanted more than anything. And it's like the family you never knew staring back at you. That would be so hard to even move from. Like, I feel so bad for him. He got to see the one thing he wanted more than anything, but nah. At least Dumbledore was there to be able to talk to him. And that was the end of the chapter. Anyways, hello, Morrigan Wolf. How are you? It is good to see you. Why did my screens just... Oh, because I stayed on a picture too... I stayed on a picture too much. Okay, I do understand. Windows does that. If you, like, hover over a thumbnail, something on the bottom where your taskbar is, and you just move over, it'll kind of fade everything out, and you only see that one for a moment. Caught me off guard. Let's drink some water and continue. About, 25 more pages or so before I have to stop. Because otherwise I won't have anything for the next stream. Oh. I could finish it tonight, but I gotta give the library some time to get me some new books. So, let's begin again, yes? Chapter 13, Nicholas Flamel. Dumbledore had convinced Harry not to go looking for the Mayor of Erised again, and for the rest of the Christmas holiday. For the rest of the Christmas holidays, invisibility cloaks stay folded at the bottom of his trunk. Harry wished he could forget what he'd seen in the mirror as easily, but he couldn't. He started having nightmares. Over and over again, he dreamed about his parents disappearing in a flash of green light, while a high voice cackled with laughter. You see, Dumbledore was right. That mirror could have driven you mad, said Ron when Harry told him about these dreams. Hermione, who came back the day before term started, took a different view of things. She was torn between horror at the idea of Harry being out of bed, roaming the school 3 nights in a row. If Filch had caught you, and disappointed that he hadn't at least found out who Nicholas Flamel was. They had almost given up hope of ever finding Flamel in a library book, even though Harry was still sure he'd read the name somewhere. Once the term had started, they were back to skimming through books for 10 minutes during their breaks. Harry had even less time than the other two, because Quidditch practice had started again. Wood was working the team harder than ever, even as the endless rain that replaced the snow couldn't dampen his spirits. The Weasleys complained that Wood was becoming a fanatic, but Harry was on Wood's side. If they won their next match against Hufflepuff, They would overtake Slytherin in the House Championship, the first time in 7 years. But apart from wanting to win, Harry found that he had fewer nightmares when he was tired out after training. Then, during one particularly wet and muddy practice session, Wood gave the team a bit of bad news. He just got very angry with the Weasleys, who kept dive bombing each other and pretending to fall off the brooms. "Will you stop messing around?" he yelled. "It's exactly the sort of thing that'll lose us the match. Snape's refereeing this time. He'll be looking for any excuse to knock points off Gryffindor." George Weasley really did fall off his brooms at these words. "Snape's refereeing," sputtered through a mouthful of mud. When's he ever refereed a Quidditch match? He's not going to be fair if we might overtake Slytherin. The rest of the team landed next to George to complain too. "It's not my fault," said Wood. "We just got to make sure we play a clean game, so Snape hasn't got an excuse to pick on us." Which all went very well, thought Harry. But he had another reason for not wanting Snape near him while he was playing Quidditch. The rest of the team hung back to talk to each other as usual at the end of practice. But Harry went straight back to the Gryffindor common room, where he found Ron and Hermione playing chess. Chess was the only thing Hermione ever lost at. Something Harry and Ron thought was very good for her. "Don't talk to me for a moment," said Ron when Harry sat down next to him. "I need to He caught sight of Harry's face. "What's the matter with you? You look terrible." Speaking quietly so that no one else would hear, Harry told the other two about Snape's sudden, sinister desire to become a Quidditch referee. "Don't play," said Hermione at once. "Say you're ill," said Ron. Pretend to break your leg," Hermione suggested. "Really break your leg," said Ron. "I can't," said Harry. "Isn't a reserve seeker. If I back out, Gryffindor can't play at all." At that moment, Neville toppled into the common room. How he managed to climb through the portrait hole was anyone's guess, because his legs had been stuck together when they recognized at once what they recognized at once as the leg locker curse. He must have had to bunny hop all the way up to Gryffindor Tower. Everyone fell about, laughing except Hermione, who leapt up and performed the counter curse. Neville's legs sprang apart, and he got to his feet trembling. "What happened?" Hermione asked him, leading him over to sit with Harry and Ron. "Malfoy," said Neville shakily. "I met him outside the library. He said he'd been looking for someone to practice that on." Go to Professor McGonagall," Hermione urged Neville. "Report him." Neville shook his head. "I don't want any more trouble." "You've got to stand up to him, Neville," said Ron. "He's used to walking all over people, but that's no reason to lie down in front of him and make it easier." "There's no need to tell me I'm not brave enough to beat Gryffindor. Malfoy's already done that," Neville choked. Harry felt in the pocket of his robes and pulled out a chocolate frog. Very last one from the box Hermione had given him for Christmas. He gave it to Neville, who looked as though he might cry. You're worth 12 of Malfoy, Harry said. The Sorting Hat chose you for Gryffindor, didn't it? And where's Malfoy? In stinking Slytherin. Neville's lips twitched in a weak smile as he unwrapped the fog. Thanks, Harry. I think I'll go to bed. Do you want the card? You collect them, don't you? As Neville walked away, Harry looked at the famous wizard card again. Or famous wizard card. Dumbledore again, he said. He was the first one I ever... He gasped. Stared back at the card. Then he looked up at Ron and Hermione. I found him, whispered. I found Flamel. I told you I've read the name somewhere before. I read it on the train coming here. Listen to this. Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. Hermione jumped to her feet. She hadn't looked so excited since they got back the marks for their very first piece of homework. Stay there, she said, and she sprinted up the stairs to the girls' dormitories. Harry and Ron barely had time to exchange mystified looks before she was dashing back an enormous old book in her arms. I never thought to look here, she whispered excitedly. I got this out of the library weeks ago for a bit of light reading. Light, said Ron, but Hermione told him to be quiet until she looked something up and started flicking frantically through the pages, muttering to herself. At last, she found what she was looking for. I knew it! I knew it! Are we allowed to speak yet? Said Ron grumpily. Hermione ignored him. Nicholas Flamel, she whispered dramatically, is the only... Nicholas Flamel, she whispered dramatically, is the only known maker of the Sorcerer's Stone. This didn't have quite the effect she'd expected. The what? Oh, honestly, don't you two read? Look, read that there. She pushed the book towards them, and Harry and Ron read. The ancient study of alchemy is concerned with the making of the Sorcerer's Stone, a legendary substance with astonishing powers. The stone will transform any metal into pure gold. It also produces the elixir of life, which will make the drinker immortal. There have been many reports of the Sorcerer's Stone over the centuries, but the only stone currently in existence belongs to Mr. Nicholas Flamel, the noted alchemist and opera lover. Mr. Flamel, who celebrated his 665th birthday last year, enjoys a quiet life in Devon with his wife, Pernell, 658. See, said Hermione when Harry and Ron finished, the dog must be guarding Flamel's Sorcerer's Stone. I bet he asked Dumbledore to keep it safe for him because they're friends and he knew someone was after it. That's why he wanted the stone moved out of Gringotts. A stone that makes gold and stops you ever dying, said Harry. No wonder Snape's after it. Anyone would want it. And no wonder we couldn't find Flamel in his study of recent developments in wizardry, said Ron. He's not exactly recent if he's 665, is he? Next morning in defense against dark arts, while copying down different ways of treating werewolf bites, Harry and Ron were still discussing what they'd do with a Sorcerer's Stone if they had one. It wasn't until Ron said he'd buy his own Quidditch team that Harry remembered about Snape in the coming match. I'm going to play, he told Ron and Hermione. If I don't, all the Slytherins will think I'm just too scared to face Snape. I'll show them. It'll really wipe the smiles off their faces if we win. Just as long as we're not wiping you off the pitch, said Hermione. As the match drew nearer, however, Harry became more and more nervous. Whatever he told Ron and Hermione, the rest of the team weren't too calm either. The idea of overtaking Slytherin in the House Championship was wonderful. No one had done it for nearly 7 years. But would they be allowed to, with such a biased referee? Harry didn't know whether he was imagining it or not, but he seemed to keep running into Snape wherever he went. At times, he even wondered whether Snape was following him, trying to catch him on his own. Potion lessons were turning into a sort of weekly torture. Snape was so horrible to Harry. Could Snape possibly know they'd found out about the Sorcerer's Stone? Harry didn't see how he could. Yet, sometimes, he had the horrible feeling that Snape could read minds. Harry knew, when they wished him good luck outside the changing rooms next afternoon, that Ron and Hermione were wondering whether they'd ever see him alive again. This wasn't what you'd call comforting. Harry hardly heard a word of Wood's pep talk as he pulled on his Quidditch robes and picked up his Nimbus 2000. Ron and Hermione, meanwhile, had found a place in the stands next to Neville, who couldn't understand why they looked so grim and worried, or why they both had brought their wands to the match. Little did Harry know that Ron and Hermione had been secretly practicing the leg locker curse. They got the idea from Malfoy using it on Neville, and were ready to use it on Snape if he showed any sign of wanting to hurt Harry. Now, don't forget, it's locomotor mortis, Hermione muttered as Ron slipped his wand up his sleeve. I know, Ron snapped. Don't nag. Back in the changing room, Wood had taken Harry aside. Don't want to pressure you, Potter, but if we ever need an early capture of the snitch, it's now. Finish the game before Snape can favor Hufflepuff too much. Whole school's out there, said Fred Weasley, peering out the door. Even Limey, Dumbledore's come to watch. Harry's heart did a somersault. Dumbledore, he said, dashing to the door to make sure. Fred was right. There was no mistaking that Silverbeard. Harry could have laughed out loud with relief. He was safe. There was simply no way that Snape would dare to try to hurt him if Dumbledore was watching. Perhaps that was why Snape was looking so angry as the teams marched onto the pitch, something that Ron noticed too. I've never seen Snape look so mean, he told Hermione. Look, they're off. Ouch! Somebody had poked Ron in the back of the head. It was Malfoy. Oh, sorry, Weasley. Didn't see you there. Malfoy grinned broadly at Crabbe and Goyle. Wonder how long Potter's gonna stay on his broom this time. Anyone want to bet? How about you, Weasley? Ron didn't answer. Snape had just awarded Hufflepuff a penalty because George Weasley had hit a bludger at him. Hermione, who had all her fingers crossed in her lap, squinting fixedly at Harry, who was circling the game like a hawk, looking for the snitch. You know how I think they chose people for the Gryffindor team? Said Malfoy loudly a few minutes later, as Snape awarded Hufflepuff another penalty for no reason at all. It's people they feel sorry for. See, there's Potter, who's got no parents, and then there's the Weasleys, who's got no money. You should be on the team, Longbottom. You've got no brains. Neville went bright red but turned his seat to face Malfoy. I'm worth 12 of you, Malfoy, he stammered. Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle howled with laughter. But Ron, still not daring to take his eyes from the game, said, You tell him, Neville. Longbottom, if brains were gold, you'd be poorer than Weasley. And that's saying something. Ron's nerves were already stretched to the breaking point with anxiety about Harry. I'm warning you, Malfoy. One more word. Ron! Said Hermione suddenly. Harry! What? Where? Harry had suddenly gone into a spectacular dive which drew gasps and cheers from the crowd. Hermione stood up, her crossed fingers in her mouth, as Harry streaked towards the ground like a bullet. You're in luck, Weasley. Potter's always spotted some money on the ground, said Malfoy. Ron snapped. Before Malfoy knew what was happening, Ron was on top of him, wrestling him to the ground. Neville hesitated, then clambered over the back of his seat to help. Come on, Harry, Hermione screamed, leaping onto her seat to watch as Harry sped straight towards Snape. She didn't even notice that Malfoy and Ron were rolling around under her seat, or the scuffles and yelps coming from the whirl of fists that was Neville, Crabbe, and Goyle. Up in the air, Snape turned on his broomstick just in time to see something scarlet shoot past him, missing him by inches. Next second, Harry had pulled out of the dive, raised his arm in triumph. The snitch clasped in his hand. The stands erupted. It had to be a record. No one could ever remember the snitch being caught so quickly. Ron, where are you? The game's over. Harry won. We've won. Gryffindor are in the lead, shrieked Hermione, dancing up and down on her seat and hugging Parvati Patil in the front row. Harry jumped off his broom, foot off the ground. Couldn't believe it. He'd done it. The game was over. It had barely lasted 5 minutes. As Gryffindors came spilling onto the pitch, he saw Snape land nearby, white-faced and tight-lipped. Then Harry felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up into Dumbledore's smiling face. Well done, said Dumbledore quietly, so that only Harry could hear. Nice to see you haven't been brooding about that mirror. Been keeping busy. Excellent. Snape spat bitterly on the ground. Harry left the changing room alone. Some time later, to take his Nimbus 2000 back to the broom shed. He could never remember feeling happier. He'd really done something to be proud of now. No one could say he was just a famous name anymore. The evening air had never smelled so sweet. He walked over the damp grass, reliving the last hour in his head, which was such a happy blur. Gryffindors running to lift him off their shoulders. Ron and Hermione in the distance jumping up and down. Ron cheering through a heavy nosebleed. Harry had reached the shed. He leant against the wooden door and looked up at Hogwarts with its windows glowing red in the setting sun. Gryffindor in the lead. Done it! He chose Snape. And speaking of Snape, a hooded figure came swiftly down the front steps of the castle. Clearly not wanting to be seen, it walked as fast as possible towards the Forbidden Forest. Harry's victory faded from his mind as he watched. He recognized the figure's prowling walk. Snape, sneaking into the forest while everyone else was at dinner. What was going on? Harry jumped back on his Nimbus 2000 and took off, gliding silently over the castle. He saw Snape enter the forest at a run. He followed. The trees were so thick he couldn't see where Snape had gone. He flew in circles, lower and lower, brushing the top branches of trees until he heard voices. He glided towards them and landed noiselessly in a towering beech tree. He climbed carefully along one of the branches, holding tight his broomstick, trying to see through the leaves. Below, in a shadowy clearing, stood Snape. But he wasn't alone. Quirrell was there too. Couldn't make out the look on his face. He was stuttering worse than ever. Harry strained to catch what they were saying. Don't know why you wanted to meet here, of all places, Severus. Oh, I thought we'd keep this private, said Snape, his voice icy. Students aren't supposed to know about the Sorcerer's Stone after all. Harry leaned forward, Quirrell mumbling something. Snape interrupted him. Have you found out how to get past that beast of Hagrid's yet? But Severus, You don't want me as your enemy, Quirrell, said Snape, taking a step towards him. I don't know what you... You know perfectly well what I mean. An owl hooted loudly, and Harry nearly fell out of the tree. He steadied himself in time to hear Snape say, Your little bit of hocus pocus. I'm waiting. But I don't. Very well, Snape cut in. We'll have another little chat soon, when you've had time to think things over and decided where your loyalties lie. He threw his cloak over his head and strode out of the clearing. It was almost dark now. Harry could see Quirrell standing quite still as though he were petrified. Harry, where have you been? Hermione squeaked. We won. You won. We won, shouted Ron, thumping Harry on the back. And I gave Malfoy a black eye, and Neville tried to take on Crabbe and Goyle single-handed. He's still out cold, but Madame Pomfrey said he'll be all right. Talk about showing Slytherin. Everyone's waiting for you back in the common room. We're having a party. Fred and George stole some cakes and stuff from the kitchens. Never mind that now, said Harry breathlessly. Let's find an empty room. You wait till you hear this. He made sure Peeves wasn't inside before shutting the door behind him. Then he told them what he'd seen and heard. So we were right. It is the Sorcerer's Stone. And Snape's trying to force Quirrell to help him get it. He asked if he knew how to get past Fluffy, and he said something about Quirrell's hocus pocus. I reckon there are other things guarding the stone apart from Fluffy. Loads of enchantments. Probably. And Quirrell would have done some anti-dark art spell which Snape needs to break through. So you mean the stone's only safe as long as Quirrell stands up to Snape? Said Hermione in alarm. It'll be gone by next Tuesday, said Ron. There's a stitch in my back. And that's the end of the chapter. Wow. Stitch in my back. That sucked. That sucked. That sucked. That sucked. I got... how many more pages until the end of this next chapter? I think I could do one more chapter. Yeah, I think I could do one more chapter. Alright. Picture time, yes? Alright. There's the cover. There's the cover art. The cover art for chapter 13. Loads of trees just starting. What was that? Starting to turn. No, that. Yeah, just a little green. Hanging on to the green, and even in the dead of winter. The pile of books that they were reading. Nothing terribly too special about it. Nothing here. I felt a crease somewhere in here. Wasn't me though. Very careful with the book. I'm more likely to get a paper cut than anything. Really? There's no pictures in this chapter? You gotta be kidding me. Is it just the books? Oh, they had the whole chapter, or they had the whole Hufflepuff match. All 5 minutes of it. Not a single picture other than a pile of books. It's fine. Not all chapters really need pictures. I mean, the original books had, what? Just one per chapter? Alright. Hope everyone's doing okay. We'll finish this chapter 14, and then we'll call it a stream, yeah? That'll give me something to read tomorrow. Alright. Chapter 14. Norbert, the Norwegian Ridgeback. Quirrell, however, must have been braver than they thought. In the weeks that followed, he did seem to be getting paler and thinner, but it didn't look as though he cracked yet. Every time they passed the third-floor corridor, Harry, Ron, and Hermione would press their ears to the door to check that Fluffy was still growling inside. Snape was sweeping about in his usual bad temper, which which surely meant that the stone was still safe. Whenever Harry pressed Quirrell these days, he gave him an encouraging sort of smile, and Ron had started telling people off for laughing at Quirrell's laughter, wearing at and Ron had started telling people off for laughing at Quirrell's stutter. Hermione, however, had more on her mind than the Sorcerer's Stone. She started drawing up revision timetables and color-coding all her notes. Harry and Ron wouldn't have minded, but she kept nagging at them to do the same. Hermione, the exams are ages away. 10 weeks. Hermione snapped. That's not ages. That's like a second to Nicholas Flamel. We're not 600 years old, Ron reminded her. Anyway, what are you revising for? You already know it all. What am I revising for? Are you mad? You realize we need to pass the exams to get into the second year? They're very important. I should have started studying a month ago. I don't know what's gotten into me. Unfortunately, the teachers seemed to be thinking along the same lines as Hermione. They piled so much homework on them that the Easter holidays weren't nearly as fun as the Christmas ones. It was hard to relax with Hermione next to you reciting the 12 uses of dragon's blood or practicing wand movements. Moaning and yawning, Harry and Ron spent most of their free time in the library with her, trying to get through all their extra work. Excuse me. I'll never remember this, Ron burst out one afternoon, throwing down his quill and looking longingly out the library window. It was the first really fine day they've had in months. The sky was a clear forget-me-not blue. There was a feeling in the air of summer coming. Harry was looking up Dittany in 1,000 magical herbs and fungi. Didn't look up until he heard Ron said, Hagrid, what are you doing in the library? Hagrid shuffled into view, hiding something behind his back. He looked very out of place in his moleskin overcoat. Just looking, he said in a shifty voice that got their interest at once. What are you lot up to? He looked suddenly suspicious. You're not still looking for Nicholas Flamel, are you? Oh, we found out who he is ages ago, said Ron impressively, and we know what that dog's guarding. It's a Sorcerer's Stone. Shh! Hagrid looked around quickly to see if anyone was listening. Don't go shouting about it. What's the matter with you? There are a few things we wanted to ask you, as a matter of fact, said Harry, about what's guarding the stone apart from Fluffy. Shh, said Hagrid again. Listen, come and see me later. Not promising I'll tell you anything, mind. Don't go rabbiting about it in here. Students aren't supposed to know. They'll think I've told you. See you later, then, said Harry. Hagrid shuffled off. What's he hiding behind his back? Said Hermione thoughtfully. Do you think it had something to do with the stone? I'm going to see what section he was in, said Ron, who had enough of working. He came back in a minute with a pile of books in his arms and slammed them down on the table. Dragons! He whispered. Hagrid was looking up stuff about dragons. Look at these. Dragon Species of Great Britain and Ireland from Egg to Inferno. A Dragon's Guide. Hagrid's always wanted a dragon. He told me so the first time I ever met him, said Harry. But it's against our laws, said Ron. Dragon breeding was outlawed by Warlock's Convention of 1709. Everyone knows that. It's hard to stop muggles noticing us if we keep eating dragons in the back garden. Anyway, you can't tame dragons. It's dangerous. You should see the burns Charlie's got off wild ones in Romania. But aren't there wild dragons in Britain? Said Harry. Of course there are, said Ron. Common Welsh and Hebridean blacks. The Ministry of Magic has a job hushing them up, I can tell you. Our lot have to keep putting spells on muggles who've spotted them. Make them forget. So what on earth's Hagrid up to? Said Hermione. When they knocked on the door of the gamekeeper's hut an hour later, they were surprised to see that all the curtains were closed. Hagrid called, "Who is it?" before he let them in, and then shut the door quickly behind them. Stifling hot inside. Even though it was such a warm day, there was a blazing fire in the grate. Hagrid made them tea and offered them stout sandwiches, which they refused. So, you wanted to ask me something? Yes, said Harry. There was no point in beating around the bush. We were wondering if you could tell us what's guarding the Sorcerer's Stone apart from Fluffy. Hagrid frowned at him. Of course I can't, he said. Number 1, I don't know myself. Number 2, you know too much already, so I wouldn't tell you if I could. Stone's here for a good reason. It was almost stolen out of Gringotts. I suppose you worked all that out and all. Beats me how you even know about Fluffy. Oh, come on. Come on, Hagrid. You might not want to tell us, but you do know. You know everything that goes on round here, said Hermione in a warm, flattering voice. Hagrid's beard twitched, and they could tell he was smiling. We only wondered who had done the guarding, really, Hermione went on. We wondered who Dumbledore had trusted enough to help him, apart from you. Hagrid's chest swelled at these last words. Harry and Ron beamed at Hermione. Well, I don't suppose it could hurt to tell you that. Let's see. He borrowed Fluffy from me. Then some of the teachers did enchantments. Professor Sprout, Professor Flitwick, Mr. McGonagall. He ticked them off on his fingers. Professor Quirrell and Dumbledore himself did something, of course. Hang on, I've forgotten someone. Oh yeah, Professor Snape. Snape? Yeah. You're not still on about that, are you? Look, Snape helped protect the stone. He's not about to steal it. Harry knew Ron and Hermione were thinking the same thing he was. If Snape had been on protecting the stone, it must be easy to find out how the other teachers had guarded it. He probably knew everything, except, it seemed, Whirl Spell, and how to get past Fluffy. You're the only one who knows how to get past Fluffy, aren't you, Hagrid? Said Harry anxiously. And you wouldn't tell anyone, would you? Not even one of the teachers? Not a soul knows except me and Dumbledore, said Hagrid proudly. Well, that's something. Harry muttered to the others. Hagrid, can we have a window open? I'm boiling. Can't, Harry. Sorry, said Hagrid. Harry noticed him glance at the fire. Harry looked at it too. Hagrid, what's that? But he already knew what it was. In the very heart of the fire, underneath the kettle, was a huge black egg. Ah, said Hagrid, fiddling nervously with his beard. That's, Where did you get it, Hagrid? Said Ron, crouching over the fire to get a closer look at the egg. It must have cost you a fortune. Won it, said Hagrid. Last night, I was down in the village having a few drinks. Got into a game of cards with a stranger. I think I was quite glad to get rid of it, to be honest. But what were you going to do with it when it's hatched? Well, I've been doing some reading, said Hagrid, pulling out a large book from under his pillow. Got this out of the library. Dragon breeding for profit and pleasure. It's a bit out of date, of course, but it's all in there. Keep the egg in the fire, 'cause their mothers breathe on 'em, see? And when it hatches, feed it a bucket of brandy mixed with chicken blood every half hour. And see here, how to recognize different eggs? What I got there is a Norwegian Ridgeback. They're rare, damn. He looked very pleased with himself, but Hermione didn't. Hagrid, you live in a wooden house, she said. But Hagrid wasn't listening. He was humming merrily as he stoked the fire. So now they had something else to worry about. What might happen to Hagrid if anyone found out he was hiding an illegal dragon in his hut? Wonder what it's like to have a peaceful life, Ron sighed, as evening after evening they struggled through all the extra homework they were getting. Hermione had now started making revision timetables for Harry and Ron, too. It's driving them mad. Then, one breakfast time, Hedwig brought Harry another note from Hagrid. He had written only 2 words. It's hatching. Ron wanted to skip herbology and go straight down to the hut. Hermione wouldn't hear of it. Hermione, how many times in our lives are we going to see a dragon hatching?
We got lessons. We'll get in trouble. And that's nothing to what Hagrid's going to be in when someone finds out what he's doing.
Shut up, Harry whispered. Malfoy was only a few feet away, and he had stopped dead to listen. How much had he heard? Harry didn't like the look on Malfoy's face at all. Ron and Hermione argued all the way to herbology, and, in the end, Hermione agreed to run down to Hagrid with the other 2 during morning break. When the bell sounded from the castle at the end of their lesson, 3 of them dropped their towels at once and hurried through the grounds to the edge of the forest. Hagrid greeted them, looking flushed and excited. It's nearly out, he ushered them inside. The egg was lying on the table. There were deep cracks in it. Something was moving inside. A funny clicking noise was coming from it. They all drew their chairs up to the table and watched with bated breath. All at once, there was a scraping noise, and the egg split open. The baby dragon flopped onto the table. It wasn't exactly pretty. Harry thought it looked like a crumpled black umbrella. Its spiny wings were huge compared to its skinny jet body, and a long snout with wide nostrils, stubs of horns, and bulging orange eyes. It sneezed. A couple sparks flew out of its snout. Isn't it beautiful? Hagrid murmured. He reached a hand to stroke the dragon's head. It snapped at his fingers, showing pointed fangs. Bless him. Look, he knows his mummy, says Hagrid. Hagrid, said Hermione. How fast do Norwegian ridgebacks grow exactly? Hagrid was about to answer when the color suddenly drained from his face. He leapt to his feet and ran to the window. What's the matter? Someone was looking through the gap in the curtains. It's a kid. He's running back up to the school. Harry bolted the door and looked out. Even at a distance, there's no mistaking him. Malfoy had seen the dragon. Something about the smile lurking on Malfoy's face during the next week made Harry, Ron, and Hermione very nervous. They spent most of their free time in Hagrid's darkened hut, trying to reason with him. Just let him go. Set him free. I can't, said Hagrid. He's too little. He'd die. He looked at the dragon. It had grown 3 times in length in just a week. Smoke kept furling out of its nostrils. Hagrid hadn't been doing his gamekeeping duties because the dragon was keeping him so busy. There were empty brandy bottles and chicken feathers all over the floor. I've decided to call him Norbert, said Hagrid, looking at the dragon with misty eyes. Really knows me now. Watch. Norbert, Norbert, where's Mummy? He's lost his marbles, Ron muttered in Harry's ear. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, give it a fortnight, and Norbert's going to be as long as your house. Malfoy could go to Dumbledore at any moment. Hagrid bit his lip. I know I can't keep him forever. Just can't dump him. Can't. Harry suddenly turned to Ron. Charlie, he said too. You're losing it too, said Ron. I'm Ron, remember? No, Charlie, your brother Charlie, in Romania, studying dragons. Send Norbert to him. Charlie can take care of him, and then put him back in the wild. Brilliant, said Ron. How about it, Hagrid? And in the end, Hagrid agreed that they could send an owl to Charlie to ask him. The following week dragged by. Wednesday night found Hermione and Harry sitting alone in the common room, long after everyone else had gone to bed. The clock on the wall had just chimed midnight when the portrait hole burst open. Ron appeared out of nowhere as he pulled off Harry's invisibility cloak. He had been down at Hagrid's hut, helping feed Norbert, who was now eating dead rats by the crate. It bit me, he said, showing them his hand, which was wrapped in a bloody handkerchief. I'm not going to be able to hold a quill for a week. I tell you, that dragon's the most horrible animal I've ever met. The way Hagrid goes on about it, you'd think it was a fluffy little bunny rabbit. When it bit me, he told me off for frightening it. When I left, he was singing a lullaby. There was a tap on the dark window. It's Hedwig, said Harry, hurrying to let her in. She'll have Charlie's answer. The 3 of them put their heads together to read the note. Dear Ron, how are you? Thanks for the letter. I'd be glad to take the Norwegian witch back. It won't be easy getting him here. I think the best thing will be to send him over with some friends of mine who are coming to visit me next week. Trouble is, they mustn't be seen carrying an illegal dragon. Could you get the Ridgeback up to the tallest tower at midnight on Saturday? They can meet you there and take him away while it's still dark. Send me an answer as soon as possible. Love, Charlie. They looked at each other. We got the invisibility cloak. It shouldn't be too difficult. I think the cloak's big enough to cover two of us and Norbert. It was a mark of how bad the last week had been that the other two agreed with him. Anything to get rid of Norbert and Malfoy. There was a hitch. By next morning, Ron's bitten head had swollen to twice its usual size. He didn't know whether it was safe to go to Madame Pomfrey, which he recognized a dragon bite. By the afternoon, though, he had no choice. The cut had turned a nasty shade of green. It looked as if Norbert's fangs were poisonous. Harry and Hermione rushed up to the hospital wing at the end of the day to find Ron in a terrible state in bed. "It's not just my hand," he whispered, "although that feels like it's about to fall off." Malfoy told Madame Pomfrey he wanted to borrow one of my books so he could come and have a good laugh at me. He kept threatening to tell her what really bit me. I've told her it was a dog. I don't think she believes me. I shouldn't have hit him in the Quidditch match. That's why he's doing this. Harry and Hermione tried to calm Ron down. "It'll all be over at midnight on Saturday," said Hermione. This didn't soothe Ron at all. On the contrary, he sat bolt upright and broke into a sweat. "Midnight on Saturday," he said in a hoarse voice. "Oh no. Oh no. I just remembered. Charlie's letter was in that book Malfoy took. Now he's going to know we're getting rid of Norbert." Harry and Hermione didn't get a chance to answer. Madame Pomfrey came over at that moment and made them leave, saying Ron needed sleep. "It's too late to change the plan now," Harry told Hermione. "We haven't got the time to send Charlie another owl, and this could be our only chance to get rid of Norbert. We'll have to risk it. And we have got the invisibility cloak. Malfoy doesn't know about that." They found Fang the boarhound sitting outside with a bandaged tail when they went to tell Hagrid, who opened a window to talk to them. "I won't let you in," he puffed. "Norbert's at a tricky stage. Nothing I can't handle." When they told him about Charlie's letter, his eyes filled with tears, although that might have been because Norbert had just bitten him on the leg. It's all right. You only just got my boot. Just playing. You're only a baby after all." The baby banged its tail on the wall, making the windows rattle. Harry and Hermione walked back to the castle, feeling Saturday couldn't come quickly enough. They would have felt sorry for Hagrid when the time came for him to say goodbye to Norbert. If they hadn't been so worried about what they had to do. It was a very dark, cloudy night, and they were a bit late arriving at Hagrid's hut because they had to wait for Peeves to get out of their way in the entrance hall, where he had been playing tennis against the wall. Hagrid had Norbert packed and ready in a large crate. "He's got loads of rat and some brandy for the journey, and I packed his teddy bear in case he gets lonely." From inside the crate came ripping noises that sounded to Harry as though Teddy was having his head torn off. Hey, Norbert, Hagrid sobbed, as Harry and Hermione covered the crate with the invisibility cloak and stepped underneath it themselves. Mummy will never forget you. How they managed to get the crate back up to the castle, they never knew. Midnight ticked nearer as they heaved Norbert up the marble staircase in the entrance hall and along the dark corridors. Up another staircase, then another. Even one of Harry's shortcuts didn't make the work much easier. Nearly there, Harry panted as they reached the corridor beneath the tallest tower. Then a sudden movement ahead of them made them almost drop the crate. Forgetting that they were already invisible, they shrank into the shadows, staring at the dark outlines of two people grappling with each other 10 feet away. A lamp flared. Professor McGonagall, in a tartan dress gown and a hairnet, had Malfoy by the ear.
Detention,
she shouted.
And 20 points from Slytherin. Wandering around in the middle of the night, how dare you?
You don't understand, Professor. You don't understand, Professor. Harry Potter's coming. He's got a dragon.
What utter rubbish! How dare you tell such lies? Come on, I shall see Professor Snape about you, Malfoy.
Steep spiral staircase up the top of the tower seemed the easiest thing in the world after that. Not until they stepped out in the cold night air did they throw off the cloak, glad to be able to breathe properly again. Hermione did a sort of jig.
Malfoy's got detention. I could sing.
Don't, Harry advised her. Chuckling about Malfoy, they waited. Norbert thrashing about his grate. About 10 minutes later, 4 broomsticks came swooping down out of the darkness. Charlie's friends were a cheery lot. They showed Harry and Hermione the harness they rigged up so they could suspend Norbert between them. They all helped buckle Norbert safely into it, and then Harry and Hermione shook hands with the others and thanked them very much. At last, Norbert was gone. They slipped back down the spiral staircase, their hearts as light as their hands, now that Norbert was off. No more dragon, Malfoy in detention. What could spoil their happiness? The answer to that was waiting at the foot of the stairs. As they stepped onto the corridor, Filch's face loomed suddenly out of the darkness. Well, he whispered. We are in trouble. They left the invisibility cloak on top of the tower. And that is the end of chapter 14. We got just enough to finish all of this off tomorrow. About 50 pages, yeah? Actually, I think it's exactly 50 pages. Just enough to finish. How'd you like to see some pictures? I saw some pretty good ones in here. Hello, Megan. Welcome to you. Alright. I think that might be a rat. No, it might be part of the Norwegian Ridgeback cracking out of the egg. That's some really interesting art for the for the cover of 15. It's a picture of all the eggs. What was this? Dragon eggs from dragon breeding from prep. Dragon eggs, dragon breeding for pleasure and profit. Here's a picture of all the eggs. I like doing this kind of stream, honestly. It's very relaxing. I actually plan on doing a lot more. People seem to actually like this. I was kind of afraid I'd have no one, absolutely no one, who was interested in any of this. Although, I'm not entirely certain starting at 7 is a good idea. But, I'd love to go for longer, but it's like, I just spent 3 hours on 50 pages, and I don't have the next book, and I only have 50 pages to go, so it's just like, yeah. How are you? At all the eggs, all the different kind of little swirls. I actually like that tiny blue one. The Peruvian viper tooth, Chinese fireball, antique obeli, Ukrainian iron belly, Hungarian horntail, Swedish short snout, the Hebridean black, Romanian longhorn, Norwegian ridgeback, and the common Welsh green. Common Welsh, because dragons are totally common. Yeah. I'll take a frost dragon to go, please. I actually like the cold. I'll take a frost dragon. I've always been a fan of ice. No pictures on this page. There's a picture of Malfoy Malfoy staring at the outside of the window, just peering in, watching. I don't understand some people who only want to sit there and ruin your life. Like, growing up, it's just like, there's so many other things you could be doing with your life. Why waste it ruining someone else's? Or sorry, why waste it to deliberately ruin someone else's? Like, that's no fun. Well, actually, no, that sounds like a lot of fun, but we won't go there. I saw this one. What was this? This one's pretty. Okay. So this was the Norwegian ridgeback cracking out of its egg. Just lying on. Wait, is it? Or is it on the castle? No. This was not. It's from the illustrated edition, Dragon Species of Great Britain and Ireland. Okay, so this isn't the dragon cracking open its shell like I thought. This is a picture of the dragon on top of either a castle or a house. One of the two. And it's upside down, it's covering both pages. It's actually very pretty. I'm adoring the artwork in this book. It's strange though, I'm not really, it's like I'm glossing over the art rather than giving it a lot of detail, but it's how I admire it. I do look at each and every single one. It's just, I'm not like the biggest artist in the world. And as I say that, I'm looking at each individual brick and I'm noticing that there's, like, here you see bricks in the chimney. If you look closely, it's hard to see, but there are lines in each one, kind of like tally marks, but only in some of them, not all. Malfoy was raised by a corrupt mom and dad. See, okay, so I do need to correct that. I'm not entirely certain he was raised by a corrupt mom and dad. I think he was raised by a mom and dad who were used to getting what they want by throwing money at it. And with wealth, it comes, it like all boils down into the kid who's just like, I'm better than you in every way. And I got money, I got all my friends. If I want something, I'll just buy it. Go away, you little commoner. Go away. And it's just like all those things add up to a spoiled rich kid who actually knows he's rich rather than being humble. In other words, I can blame his parents for spoiling their kid rather than saying, you can have some money. Spend it wisely because you're not getting more. Something like that would have worked instead of just giving the kid everything. But parenting, what can you do? Like, there is no right way to parent, or we'd all parent. We all make mistakes and we all learn. It's part of growing up, you know? Not just money. If you pay attention, Malfoy's dad was in the cult at a young age. I do remember that. I haven't read these books in a long, long time, and I only just barely remember the movies. It's been decades since I've read this. Oh, look at the little hound. What was it, a boarhound, they said? Look at the boarhound with the bandaged tail. Little rabbit, or little stuffed rabbit lying on the ground. Is that a stuffed rabbit, or is that a dead rabbit? No, that's a stuffed rabbit because it has a patched ear. Oh, poor little puppy. Poor little puppy. I have a soft spot for doggos. And there is the page where they're picking up the dragon from the parapets. Right before they got caught. You're okay. And you're okay. This isn't Minecraft where I happen to know everything. I only know bits and pieces of what I know and a few pieces of, the logical common sense that rattles around my head. I know nothing compared to anyone who's actually, paid attention to the series or read the books recently or studied anything. Like I will defer to anyone's knowledge who considers themselves an expert. I'm only sitting here reading a book trying to help people sleep. Hello, Cam Dog. Welcome to you. I saw you here the other day. I'm sorry I couldn't actually say hi immediately. I can't stop the narration when I want to. However, we were just about to end because, well, I got exactly 50 pages left, and I don't have a new book in front of me, and it's been about 3 hours, so it's just like, now's kind of a good stopping point. It's just like I got just enough for another 3-hour stream, and I don't exactly want to waste it, So, and the last chapter was actually a rather decent one. Got a bit of a cliffhanger. Harry is about to get punished for being out in the corridors in the middle of the night. Yeah, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow. And I just remembered I have donuts sitting right in front of me, right to the side of me. I cannot get over how wonderful these donuts are, or these donut holes. I'm so glad I found. And the strangest thing is I came up with the recipe myself. I didn't steal it. I didn't find it on the internet. I saw a recipe for some, I think, dumplings, and I just altered it a little bit. and I came up with those. Thought to fry them, and it was just like boom. Somehow, I've been perfecting them for the past month, and they're just so good. But the cinnamon sugar is like really, really big for it too. All right. So let's find a raid target. Matt ended. Lightning ended. Oh, okay. Let's see who we can find a raid, yeah? Oh. Dan's not gonna go live for, what, an hour? I can't do that. Ooh. Okay, so I know who I'm gonna raid tomorrow. Today, I'm gonna raid... Ooh, I'm gonna raid my friend... Oh wow, there is so many people live. Wow, I could raid Ballomatic, Pixela, Exon Man, Cobra. Let's go raid Ballomatic. I haven't seen him in a hot minute. Let's go and raid him. So let's see if I can't redirect to him. Edit, customization, redirect. You type. There we go. All right. So tomorrow we'll do the finale. I got the stream posted and everything. It will be here tomorrow at 7. I'm going to go until I finish the first book. Hopefully, the library will have the next book waiting for me so I can pick it up. And they should have it sometime tomorrow or Wednesday. If they have it on either of those 2 days, I will have a book to read for you. Otherwise, I won't. I'm sorry about that. So, hashtag raid. I'm going to be raiding my friend Ballomatic. He is playing Mario Odyssey. No, Megan. Thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. I'm delighted that someone is enjoying the stream. Because even though that these are only like 3 hours long, I'm looking at the watch time and I'm sitting here saying like 30 hours of watch time from a 3-hour stream. That tells me that even though I'd never seen the view counter go up past like 10 or something, means people have been here almost the entire time. That's wonderful to see. So thank you. And thank you for being here. All of you. Thank you, Tylenol. Thank you, Bala, Manstan, Pixel, Nathan. Pixel, I posted the recipe earlier in the chat. You should be able to pick it up whenever you'd like. Emissar, Tylenol, Brony, Morgaine Wolf, Megan, Dog. Thank you all. Here's the link. 1, 2, and 3. I'll see you all over there. Good night, and I hope to see you tomorrow for the finale of the first book. Goodbye.